Thanks, James. So we've got loads to get through the next 20 minutes, so we're just going to crack on. My name is Tony McAllister. I am Partnerships Innovation Director at Global.
And I'm Faye McDowall, Strategy Director for Podcasts. We're going to spend today talking about why laughter really is the best medicine and how it can work wonders for your brand. As Tony said, we've got a packed agenda for you today. We're going to hear from Joanne McNally and Vogue Williams and their podcast, My Therapist Ghosted Me. We're also going to hear from some familiar faces and voices about why comedy and podcasts are great bedfellows. But first, I'd just like to spend a little bit of time talking about why it's important for your brand now. So we at Global have a listener panel and we speak to our listeners on a monthly basis just to find out how they're feeling about things generally. We spoke to our audience and we asked them what they would like to hear, see and feel more of. Now, across every generation we spoke to, the answer was more laughter and more positivity. So not only is it a great way for you to show more empathy with your brand, but it's also a great way to improve the bottom line. We also asked the audience if they're feeling happy and excited, were they more likely to try a new brand? 43% of our audience had tried a new brand in the last 7 days, and 36% had tried a new brand in the last 24 hours.
So we've seen a massive growth in demand for comedian-hosted, comedy or entertainment-based podcasts across the whole of Global's portfolio. Whether it's the Paul Chowdhury podcast, whether it is the Chris Moore's podcast, whether it's people being really excited for season 2 of Alan Carr's Life's a Beach podcast, or what we're going to talk about a bit later, which is a great podcast called My Therapist Ghosted Me. Now, I think part of it is the last 18 months, people leaning into wanting a bit of light relief. But actually, when people get there, as well as loving the comedy and the entertainment, people are also loving the level of detail. The host can go into the subjects, how they can delve really, really deeply, and it's a much more satisfying listen for those tuning in. Now, we have a ton of podcasts across our portfolio, and actually we work with lots of different brands. Now, the different brands that we work with, including people like giffgaff, have been really great at coming to us and actually embracing comedy. So whereas in the past, comedy could have been, for brave clients, because you never know what comedians are going to say. Lately, we've seen brands come to us and kind of go, well, actually, we should be leaning into this. So they've done everything from telcos to retail. We've had FMCG and everyone on there. So it'd be really easy for me to focus on a fun brand and a fun podcast and delivering a fun message. But actually, when giffgaff came to us, they wanted to talk about something more meaningful. And actually, comedic podcasts can really do this as well as the light-hearted stuff. So for giffgaff, they wanted to show their support for the LGBTQIA+ community. And it was a pretty simple message. It was basically, come to us and we can help you communicate and help support each other, pick up the phone. So that's what they did. Podcasts were a part of it, but also as part of that, they worked across the whole of the Global portfolio. So they did, we created some videos for them, which we pushed across our social channels, and we featured everyone from prominent people in the community, drag queens, influencers, that type of thing. Now, they also sponsor the Capital Extra Breakfast Show, and also the Capital Radio Drive Show. And those are big tier sponsorships, and they were great at delivering messages all around offer-led stuff and engagement. However, it was the podcast part of this campaign that really drove meaningful conversations. So it had a really unique way of getting across to the audience. Now, the podcasts we chose for them, 2 of them were comedy or comedian-based podcasts. So the first was Out with Susie Ruffle, and the second was Pop Off, which was presented by a really funny, and he has a load of fans, YouTuber called Lewis Ball. Now, what they were able to do, which is very different, is not just deliver host reds, not just do badging. What they were able to do is bring their own personality, their own personal experience of being in the community, and actually really connect with their audiences. So it delivered a fantastic message for giffgaff in a really authentic way. So Whistle Stop Tour, obviously I could just talk about this for 20 minutes, but it was just a great example of how comedy, personality, and meaningful messaging can really be delivered in the space of a comedy podcast.
It was a great campaign, Tony, wasn't it? And we've got some brilliant results for the podcast element of it. Next up, we're going to hear from Tony when he interviewed Vogue Williams and Joanne McNally from the podcast My Therapist Ghosted Me.
So I'm here with Joanne McNally and Vogue Williams, presenters, hosts of My Therapist Ghosted Me. I believe you've just finished recording your latest episode. How was that?
Latest episode was good. We always have a good laugh doing it, and we spend a lot of time researching topics, and it's always just fun. It's positive. Joanne is there to make me laugh all the time, which was probably needed this morning. So lovely time. Joanne, how did you find it?
It was good. We mix it up with what we've been up to and then what's going on in the world around us. So today I think it was mostly swollen testicles, face licking and breakfast buffets, because we're both huge fans. Yeah. But we agreed it is basically like eating out of an oil slick, but we're here for it.
We love it. Yeah. All very important topics.
Oh yeah. We also debunk conspiracy theories, but the lighter ones. So today we debunk the fact that fish do not have a 3-second memory. They have a memory for 12 days. So we're fighting the big fights. Yeah. We're doing important work.
I just read actually that about the fish thing as well. I think it was in the QI kind of debunking myths book. So yeah, that's definitely a myth. Now, for anyone that listens to the podcast at the moment, obviously you two are great mates, or unless that's a myth. It is a really fun and funny podcast. But for people who haven't listened to it, what is My Therapist Ghosted Me about, and how did it come about?
I would say, the title came about because my therapist did ghost me. And when we were talking, we were rambling away to Chris when we had the first chat with him, and he just thought that was like a funny angle, which has kind of worked because now I'm not in therapy. So everything kind of gets,
she can't get into therapy anymore.
Basically me and Vogue have no boundaries. So it's also unleashing all our thoughts, and thank God Joe gives us a heavy edit so that we don't so we wake up the next day and we still have a job. It's just talking. It's very light. It's very irreverent. It's just chat. There's no major, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think maybe that's why it works. And we are genuinely mates. So there's a lot of slagging going on. I like to take the piss out of Vogue, and because she's rich and I am poor, although if this podcast makes me rich, I don't know how I'm going to get away.
Joanne's becoming very rich, and she doesn't know what to do with herself.
I have the palate. I have a very cheap palate, Tony. I have the palate of a cockroach. Yeah. And Vogue is a very expensive palate, so we like playing on that.
Yeah, I do dynamic. That. I mean, I was when I first listened to it, because I thought, wow, how are they going to make a whole kind of podcast series about your therapist ghosting you? But that obviously was just a launch pad for everything that that's going on in your real life. Now, there's a load of your real life in there, and as such, there's a load of kind of your real life kind of family are featured when you talk about them in there. Does that get you into hot water at all, or do you get told off when you get home?
Well, we just kind of go on the basis that none of our family support us, so they don't hear it.
So true.
It's really hard for Joanne and I, if you listen to the pod, you'll get it. It's very hard to basically try and stop ourselves saying things that we shouldn't say. And it's like you're out at the pub with your mates, just having a laugh and talking about things. And our family get it. They've had us in their lives all the time. They don't mind. And an Irish thing is to slag people off all the time. So they're used to us slagging them off anyway.
Also, sometimes we will change a letter in a name just to protect their identity. When you see Crime Watch and they've just pixelated out the I, it's still very clear who it is. Yeah. That's kind of what we do with identities on the podcast. Yeah.
Well, I mean, people love it. And two of my colleagues who found out that I was kind of speaking to you today were kind of happy for me and furious, because they're just massive fans. So you've got kind of massive numbers, I think, in a relatively short space of time. I think there's around 1 million listeners a month now, which is huge. And there's quite a few podcasts out there that say they're unscripted, they're two mates chatting and stuff, that kind of don't get this type of numbers. So, what is the secret?
I'm sure some people think it is the worst thing they've ever heard.
I'm still listening.
I was saying to Vogue, hate brings people together way more than anything else. So people, if they have a shared hatred of someone, it'll bring them together. I have some of my closest friends I made through an equal hatred of someone else. So I was thinking, me and Vogue have such power now. The people that do hate us, I said we could probably solve the troubles up the north, world peace, things like that. Because we bring people together.
We welcome the hate,
them liking us or them absolutely hating us.
Love our hate like that. Now, from a brand point of view, brands definitely seem to be leaning more into comedy podcasts, much more than, or just comedy in general, much more than they would have done so in the past. I think in the past, it would have been seen as really risky to be around, subjects that are just all over the place, pretty free-form conversation, swearing, God forbid. But you've kind of had the likes of Georgia Asda, Crostra Mollica. The fact that brands like that are leading into what are potentially, risky waters that would have been seen so in the past. What do you think has changed?
I think brands were more wary in the first episode, or the first series, and then they kind of got the vibe. And if you listen to it, you get the vibe. Like, we're not going to be saying something absolutely horrific. Luckily, Joe cuts those bits out. So
yeah, like if we're
like a 2-hour edit down to kind of.
We feel bad for Joe when he has to edit. It's like, oh, sorry about that episode. Bye.
Shut the laptop down. I think as well, Brad, like Vogue says, it's not like we're going to be up there. Like, we're not like incredibly risque.
No.
We're irreverent.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be saying anything that's going to ruin anyone's life.
Yeah. And we're not bitchy. We're not too bitchy. Like, we're not actually, unless it's talking about Kourtney Kardashian licking tongues.
No, we don't. We're not bitchy.
Okay. And then as we come out of kind of obviously the last 18 months, and I think because of, dreaded lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, people do want a bit more light relief. This is why kind of clients are leaning into it as well. But there's definitely an appetite for more kind of live music, live comedy, Joanne, which is pretty cool. I believe you sold out the Palladium next year, 2022, which is...
Two.
I know you're doing two, but I just sold out. Absolutely fantastic. It must be
couple of seasons. Yeah, but that's all for the back of this podcast.
Yeah,
bananas.
Really? Do you think that's a big?
Yeah, she's actually quite funny as well, though. I'll have to give her that.
Oh, 100%, it's the podcast.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And kind of more and more podcasts as well are doing these one-off live events, or maybe HBO special for certain other podcasts as well. Would you ever consider a My Therapist Ghosted Me live?
Oh yeah, not a one-off though. It would be like a proper tour. Definitely, that's in the pipeline at the moment. And something, Joanne, I was just thinking about that yesterday. You're gonna have to teach me like because you're used to being up on stage. I don't really do stagey things. I do TV things. I know. So I'm gonna be like, ah!
We're gonna do a tour, but we're gonna do it properly.
Yeah.
We're not. So I think sometimes podcasts they just bang each other up on. They just bang it up really fast. Whereas we want to do it well, so we want to get like a director, and take our time with it.
We don't want people pissed off with spending money. They want to have a good show.
Because the podcast is quite chaotic, and then Joe does a big heavy edit on it. We don't want to just go up on stage and blurt out every single word that's ever come into our minds and just.
Well, I guess
people will come once. If it's not good, they won't come back. So we want to be careful with it.
And it's quite exposed, isn't it? I mean, if you've done stand up and you're quite exposed up there, you kind of want to make sure that people are having a good time, and you are, even if it's chaotic, there needs to be some kind of framework for it. Is it more like you give yourself subjects, or actually input from listeners as well? Of course, is pretty important. And then you just kind of riff off the back of that.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do. Like, we'd have a good phone conversation. We have a little WhatsApp group.
We have our Google Doc that I adore. I love the Google Doc so much. But it's important. Sorry, John. I would have never thought that so much work went into a pod until I started doing a pod. And doing it with Joanne is we constantly bounce off each other. I feel like we've started talking to each other less, because it's no, don't talk about that. We have to talk about it on the pod.
Yeah, I know.
We save stuff for it.
I guess it's quite hard if you're having a really nice conversation, off air, to recreate it in an authentic way on air. So yeah, I completely understand that. And how does it work with recording? Do you record them once a week, or is it literally just when you guys have time to fit them in? Because obviously they go out at scheduled time, but...
oh no, we record once a week. We're not one of those people that can pre-record pods in advance, because it's stuff that's happened in our week, and it's very up-to-date things. So we only record it today, and it's going out tomorrow, and which isn't ideal. But we would never record on a Monday to go out on a Thursday, because actually there is a lot of stuff that goes into it. So we give ourselves as much time in between, and we just always make ourselves available because we love it.
Yeah, we love it.
Well, it sounds great. I mean, finally for me, we don't have huge amounts of time, but if you had one bit of advice for brands that did want to work with you, you've got kind of from brands kind of watching this now, if they did want to approach you and work with you in some way, what bit of advice would you give them?
They have to let us do our own thing. Me and Vogue talk about this a lot. Sometimes I'll get approached by a brand to do something, and then they don't want your tone. They want you to like regurgitate their tone, which just doesn't work. It's like if you're coming in, it's because you're coming in because you like how we sound and what we do.
Like
so that would be
have recorded ads, and we like there's been a couple that we've actually done this with. We've been sent a script by the brand, and we're like, okay, we'll do the script, but now let us do our own thing as well and send both to them. And always they want the one that we've just done ourselves because it's more natural. You don't want, the thing about people and ads is they don't actually like ads, but you need to have them in there, and it's about making an ad not feel like an ad. And by doing that ourselves, it doesn't feel like an ad, but we know what messaging and everything to get in, so we always will.
And we never slag brands.
No.
We just like approaching it with our own voice.
Yeah.
Well, I heard something you did for Sweaty Betty recently, and I mean that didn't sound like an ad at all, and it was just fantastic. So kind of all
I found those leggings, Joanne. You didn't steal them. I got them back.
She's always accusing me of stealing her clothes. Well, if half the time you're actually right, I have stolen them, but I didn't steal those leggings. Sorry, Tony.
That's all right. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for. So I know you're really busy, so I really appreciate your time. So thanks very much.
Thanks a million, Tony.
No worries. Thanks, Tony.
Tony Filoni.
Horribly cringy for me to watch that back, obviously, but what a brilliant kind of morning to spend with those guys. I actually felt like I was on their podcast. I think we filmed about 25 minutes of footage. Sorry, Faye, I know they're your favourites.
Absolutely fuming, Tony Filoni.
Yeah, well,
I was just going to say it's probably best for everyone. I did just fangirl the whole way through the interview.
That's true. So next up from us, obviously Vogue and Joanne are two of our kind of big comedy stars, but they're not the only ones. So I'm going to hand over now to some other familiar voices and familiar faces.
We do the Chris Miles Show podcast, which is massively popular.
Huge, isn't it?
Our monthly listenership is.
Genuinely, no, I don't.
Yeah, me neither. But it's massive.
Huge.
It's more than, well, give me a number. 4 people.
Is it more
every
than that?
month? Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing very well.
And it's the best bits of the radio show. Mm-hmm. And then we do some guff at the top like this.
Yeah.
And it's massive.
Awesome. What's that? Oh, hi there. I'm Johnny Vaughan. You just caught me editing this week's podcast. Get out of the way. Yeah, that's right. What, you didn't know I had a podcast? Of course you knew. Who am I kidding? You naturally knew. Your IAB Podcast Upfront, right?
My name is Danny Wallace. I'm the host of Danny Wallace's Important Broadcast.
Hello, I'm Josh Widdicombe.
Hello, I'm Rob Beckett.
And we are the hosts of Lockdown Parenting Hell podcast.
I'm Anna Williamson, and I am one half of Luana from it's sort of become an infamous podcast now, Luana the Podcast. And I do that with my friend Louisa Zisman, who you might know from The Apprentice. You also might know because she's gobby as hell.
IAB.
Yeah,
which I think stands for International Audio.
Boo.
Audio.
Boo.
What?
Boo boo.
Well, that'll be IABB.
Oh, wait. Is it just one B?
I am
Bald.
Yeah.
Could be, couldn't it?
Well, it's to do with podcasts.
Oh.
And it's IAB. There's no P in there.
I am.
Unless it's just that silent P like Michelle Pfeiffer.
The podcast is the very best bits from 15 hours of radio during the week, just compressed down into one brilliant hour that's absolutely packed.
The reason why I wanted to start the podcast is the pandemic hit and all the theatres shut and I had to postpone my tour. So I wanted to earn, a few quid from my own home, essentially. What about you?
I wanted to do it because I just thought it was a nice thing to do to help parents that were struggling in a difficult time.
Yeah, that as well, but mainly that was the same for me really. Not the money was just a bonus.
It's a seat at the pub table, It's a nice table with your friends, who've been through the same things that you have and respect you and like you and want to make you laugh and want to get you involved. So we say come in and sit down and join in with us
I think of all the kind of mediums, I think podcast feels the most like you're just having a chat. There's no audience who you feel you have to play to, or there's no kind of, oh, I'm on TV, I need to look good, etc., etc. You're just having a chat, essentially down a slightly souped up phone. And I think it means that people are much more honest. And I think, you know, when we started this podcast, I don't think we were thinking, oh, let's talk about postnatal depression, or let's talk about, you know, how difficult various elements of parenting are. But I think, you know, genuinely, you can talk about anything from postnatal depression to finding a shit in a shoe.
And this is absolutely legit. We are so grateful that now, as we're in 2021, moving into 2022, in what is now a very busy market in the world of podcasts, you know, the world and his wife seem to have set one up, certainly since the pandemic, which I understand because it was such an important medium to really tap into people. But we're very grateful that we're still riding very high. Number one, most of the time in the podcast chart.
500,000 listens a month.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Are you serious? It's not, is it?
For this. Yeah.
Like, you had a whole new bunch of experiences that you could share with people and say to them, isn't this A, terrifying, but B, I guess sort of ludicrous and odd, and maybe even, if we try, funny. You know, thinking back to when you would walk past someone in the street. You know, you've done that a million times. But suddenly you find yourself holding your breath slightly.
I do a lot of other broadcast work. I'm on the telly, Celebs Go Dating. I do a lot of other stuff in the radio and TV space. But podcasting for me, it's up there as it's the outlet that really allows you to have as much freedom as you possibly can in the media world, to be as true, as honest, as real, and it gives you the space and the time. A lot of other media outlets, you're very, very short on time, very clipped to say what you really feel, because there just isn't the space. No one wants to hear you waffle on or me waffle on about my broken vagina for a whole hour. But it turns out in the world of podcasting, that's okay.
Being able to share in this very sort of intimate medium the minutiae of life was a way of getting through it and of laughing in the darkness.
I'd say the main message of our podcast is that parenting isn't what it looks like on Instagram. It isn't, I was about to say it isn't fun. It's fun sometimes. It's often...
It's not. It's mostly not.
It's mostly not. That's what I'm trying to say.
We've also had 14 million dedicated listeners. You know what it is? It's a great shop window for our show. And if you want to join us in that shop window with your brand name, then you get on in there before someone else does. Meanwhile, I've got to get on in here and carry on editing this week's podcast.
Yeah, and then we'll just wrap it up, because quite
great.
frankly, I don't need to do this crap. I'm way too famous. Ready?
I won't do that.
Right, are we recording?
Yeah.
Right, let's hit record now.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. I do need to ask, and Faye and I go into it in some detail on today's podcast, Tony, but how come you got the nod to interview Vogue and Joanne?
Well, I don't know, really. I think
we've got to be honest here, it is, like I said earlier, it's because I would just be fangirl giggling across the whole thing, which is no good for anybody. So Tony stepped up to the mark for me.
Yeah, so I just did some furious revision, and yeah, I'd actually brilliantly, because I hadn't listened to the podcast, I started listening to it and absolutely love it.
You're a super fan now, aren't
yeah, it's the biggest podcast in our office, that's for sure.
And I think you've got the sense, like I think you said, it just felt like you were just sitting in the middle of them doing it. I just sort of feel, it's quite twee to say, but it's so natural, isn't it?
Well, you just have to nudge, and then you can sit back and they just do the chat. And because they'd come straight off the back of recording their podcast, they were really still in that mode, to be honest. So it was pretty easy.
But part of what we've heard earlier on is, this is our third podcast up front. I guess 3 years ago, podcasts would have been in that sort of test and learn, try it, bucket, sort of as an add-on to the media plan. Where do you think we are now as an industry in terms of podcasts being a real strategic play and actually being part of a strategy brief rather than an activation one?
Well, I know where we are. Podcast is part of our partnership team now, and not kind of out on its own. Yeah. It's not separate. I think it means we can access briefs that are in the hundreds of thousands of pounds rather than the tens of thousands of pounds. and clients are kind of putting podcasts on their briefs like they used to do social, kind of like, we don't really know what to do, but can you just come to us with some ideas?
We want to be a part of it, and it's always about putting the idea at the centre of it and what the client wants to achieve. And then, because we're global and we've got so many different platforms, we can then build the solution around that. So it sort of elevates it above the, what it used to be as let's give it a go, a test and learn with the podcast. It's now, we want to do something cool, we want to do something different. What can we do that hasn't been done? And that's when, I think, when people start saying, what can we do that hasn't been done, that's when you've moved on a bit.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned on the episode, Faye, you talk about telly and telly sponsorship. Feels like that's a very natural place for advertisers to go. But actually, when you look at the numbers, especially of the big ones, I mean, it's similar play. So they should be thinking about podcasts as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and we've certainly, when we're looking at how we position things in our portfolio, we're certainly now looking at how they compare to some of our other products, and really they're sitting in a kind of a level playing field with other flagship products that we have at Global. So yeah, absolutely, it's some of the numbers are quite staggering.
Well, Rob and Josh is like a breakfast show. And breakfast shows are key sponsorship, and breakfast shows don't just sit in breakfast, they sit trails all day on different platforms, outdoor, DAX, audio. So the possibilities for the clients are kind of pretty exciting. So we're kind of we're very excited about kind of what's coming up next.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing my therapist ghosted me into my life as well.